Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I am your host. I hope you're having a beautiful day as you are listening to this podcast. And if you are a new listener, I want to say welcome. Thank you for tuning in today. And if you are a returning listener, I want to say thank you always so much for keep coming back to listen to this podcast. Before we get started on today's podcast episode, a little bit of check-in. I am leaving to Nicaragua tonight to lead my yoga retreat called Align with Purpose. And this is my second year going back to this particular retreat center in northern western coast of Nicaragua, and I am so excited to go back. I have not traveled internationally this year yet, and that's kind of rare for me. The last time I was traveling abroad was September and October of last year, 2025, when I did my trip to Japan and Thailand. I've done a lot of small trips this year, a lot of camping and hiking, and a trip to Zion National Park earlier this spring when I led another women's yoga retreat. And so I did a lot of local, more nature-y adventure trips this year and have not gone outside of the country yet. So I am starting to get a little antsy. My travel bugs are itching me to get out of the country. So I am really looking forward to going to Nicaragua with amazing group of people and spending a week together with them. So super looking forward to that. If you want to see photos and get updates on my retreat, feel free to follow me on Instagram. I will be posting lots of stories and sharing the retreat experience on my Instagram this week for sure. And one more thing I want to share before we start on today's episode is that I have an upcoming workshop coming up for yoga teachers. This is a continuing education opportunity for yoga teachers. So if you ever wondered what's actually happening inside the body when we stretch, when we're building strength, or when we're recovering from an injury, this workshop is going to be super interesting for you. I have AJ coming back as a guest teacher for August, and AJ is a doctor, a physical therapist, and a yoga teacher. So AJ brings in such a unique and informative perspective of movement for yoga teachers. So AJ is going to cover topics like active versus passive range of motion and mobility, different types of muscle contractions, how tissues adapt to load, common injuries that can happen, healing timelines, and practical ways to modify movements for students recovering from injury while still helping them build resilience. The goal of this workshop is to help you feel more confident and understanding why you're asking students to move in a certain way in the yoga classes that you teach, and not just how to teach the movement, but really thinking about the why. So workshop is going to be in person happening here in Long Beach, California, but it's going to be live streamed on Zoom if you want to join via Zoom, and it will be recorded if you cannot make it to this workshop on real time. So this is a 2-hour workshop that is happening on Saturday, August 8th from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. Like I said, it's an in-person workshop with option to join via Zoom if you don't live in Long Beach, and you can also get the access to recording if you register for the workshop. The workshop is sliding scale from $10 to $60. AJ is very, very generous to offer such a great sliding scale pricing for this workshop. So I highly encourage you to take this opportunity to learn from AJ. So if you'd like to learn more about this workshop called Yoga Meets Physical Therapy, the Science of Movement with AJ, please go check out the link on the show notes. You can click on that link and register for the workshop. Okay, enough life check-in and announcements on what's upcoming. Let's talk about this week's podcast episode. So today we are wrapping up the 3-part series called Navigating the Politics of the Yoga Industry that I recorded with a great friend, Sunny. In the first episode, we explore the question, is it yoga, fitness, or both? And we discussed about how yoga is becoming more fitness and where is the line to draw. On the second episode, we discussed whether modern yoga is losing some of the practices and philosophies that have traditionally defined it because of the commercialization of yoga. And today we're shifting our focus to the business side of being a yoga teacher. We're talking about teacher pay, unpaid labor, teacher trainings, studio structure, community, and some of the power dynamics that exist within the yoga industry. And as with the previous episodes, I do want to make a disclaimer again that our intention isn't to criticize individual studios or suggest that there's one right way to run a yoga business or to be a yoga teacher. Neither of us have ever owned a brick and mortar studio, although I have an online yoga studio, but it is quite different than running a brick and mortar studio. So we recognize that studio owners face a lot of challenges that we may not fully understand. So instead, we're just sharing our own experiences and observations in hopes that we can create more awareness and encourage thoughtful discussions with you and maybe your yoga community. So we don't have all the answers, but we do believe that asking better questions and kind of encouraging yoga teachers to have these kind of discussions can help the yoga community become more informed, yoga teachers to become more empowered, and also be compassionate yoga teachers who teach and work in this industry with ethics. So I hope you enjoyed this 3-part series that Sunny and I have recorded for you, and I love to hear what resonated with you. So without further ado, let's get into the final conversation of this series with Sunny. Welcome back, Sunny, to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. So this is the third and the final mini-series episode of what we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks. And this week we want to kind of get into the industry politics of being a yoga teacher working in the yoga industry. So I don't know, I think we could even start from our pay structure. What is your thought on pay structure for yoga teachers?
I feel like I entered the yoga teaching world with 2 vastly different examples. And it's so interesting because I didn't care because they were my first jobs and I was just so excited to be teaching.
Yeah.
One of the studios that I worked at, they offered a higher pay rate. And you didn't have any responsibility except to show up and teach. You didn't have to show up early to check people in. You didn't have to stay after to clean up. You didn't have to participate in trying to sell anything. Your job was literally to just show up and teach. And I loved that. I think that with somebody like myself who tends to run late, it could have been good to say you need to be there at least 10 minutes before. I eventually made it to that because even if you don't have to check people in, you want to say hi to folks as they're coming in. You want to assess for, do you have anything going on with you today? Things like that. And then the other studio I worked for was the complete opposite. It paid lower. You had a responsibility to show up 20 minutes before to help check in, like literally sit behind the desk, take people's money, sell things. You didn't have to sell things, but it was encouraged. And then you stayed after to clean up as well. So people think about pay rates, but they don't think about what it all encompasses a lot of times. And I was blind to it because I was just like, these are my first jobs and I'm so excited. So I didn't notice the difference until the pandemic hit 6 months later. And then we slowly started to integrate back to the studios. And I was like, I don't want to go back to a studio where I have to take people's money and touch and all the, like I realized what a privilege it was to not have those extra responsibilities.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how it's almost expected as a yoga teacher to like show up 30 minutes before, stay 30 minutes after, clean before, clean after, check people in. And for some studio, they encourage you to sell package, sell products, sell teacher trainings. There's sometimes incentive if you get people to sign up for the teacher training, you might get like $100 or whatever, the referral thing. So we're kind of encouraged to be more than a yoga teacher. We're encouraged to be salesperson, retail person, cleaning person, and then a DJ, an entertainer, and a teach yoga. So there's so much expectations. And I feel like there's almost like a lot of teachers, including me, especially in the beginning, we kind of came out of teacher training expecting this is normal. So nobody complains and everybody kind of just do it. Like, this is how it is. Until somebody started asking questions of like, wait, are we getting paid for this extra 1 hour that we're here?
Mhm.
Because we could, let's say your pay rate is $25 a class, which is, I think, is kind of common for a new yoga teacher here in Southern California at like a gym setting. But if you're asked to be there even 20 minutes before, 20 minutes after, 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after, or even 50 minutes before, 50 minutes after, that's extra 30 minutes that you're there that you're not getting paid for, on top of getting, having all these different tasks that you have to do that's outside of teaching. And I think a lot of us don't even question that. And I think studio maybe take advantage of how naive we are as a newer teacher, or as a newer teacher, we want to kind of be on the good side of the studio owner or manager so that we are likable and easy to work with. We're grateful to be there no matter what. So we're almost like unspoken words of the how we have to be able to get classes, to be able to get hired.
Yeah, it's like a leveraging thing,
Mm.
and it's just so ridiculous, and I feel like the examples we've both given are pretty moderate, I think there's a
Mhm.
pretty well-known studio where it's like you show up an hour before and stay
Mm.
an hour after and have to like, it's you do so much, and they have one of the lowest rates of pay
Mhm.
for teachers. So,
Yeah.
and I'm just not naming it. Everyone can guess what it is, but I'm just not naming it because I've never worked
Mhm.
for the studio and it's what I have heard. But it's just this really surprising thing.
Mhm.
And for me, it kind of leads into like teacher trainings, as you mentioned, like being encouraged to have people sign up for teacher trainings. And it's always been curious to me that you pay almost 3,000 or sometimes more dollars for teacher training, but you're expected to engage in karma yoga throughout it, usually,
Mhm.
which, okay, that's one thing. But then at many times at studios, both studios that I've worked for, once you pay $3,000 for a teacher training, in order to get experience teaching, you teach for free. You
Mhm.
often have like they all have a program where you can teach on Saturdays and it's a free class for the community. And so you're also doing it for free. And
Mhm.
these things systemically cut out certain people in certain groups that don't have the time or the luxury to be able to do that, especially after paying $3,000 to
Mhm.
learn. So I've been sitting with that. And I know that there are many professions where you pay a ton of money, in psychology and counseling. You pay all kinds of money to get the degree, and then you do internships that are unpaid. And I think that is very problematic as well. Difference being, I'm pretty sure the amount you make per hour as a therapist is more than $25. I
Yeah.
hope it is. You feel
Yeah.
me on that? Like, so those things have been on my mind lately.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
the exchange of energy and what you're expected to put in monetarily, but then what you're expected to receive. It's
Mhm.
tough. It's tough
It
to me.
is. It's tough. And I just recently listened to a podcast episode by Rebecca Sebastian. She's been on my podcast before, a podcast called Working in Yoga. And she started a mini series called The Math You Never Done in the
Mhm.
yoga world. And she broke down teacher training math for somebody who is teaching it, like somebody who's going to teach it, whether it's a studio or you rent a space to teach it. And all the math of like how much work that goes into teaching 200 hours, but like hours of work to like prepare, create, a book, and then paying for a space and renting. And that was also like surprisingly low.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
it's I remember like when I taught my 200-hour, like if I divided up by how many hours I was working, it was like maybe 20 something dollars an hour or even less.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
I feel like I don't know the solution, because I do want yoga teachers to like get paid fairly, and that goes both like group teachers but also teacher trainers. And then, teacher trainers are also not making that much. But then we can't keep raising the price of teacher training either. It's already so expensive.
It's a cycle. I remember we were talking about this. I had just watched a video on multi-level marketing companies, MLMs.
Yeah.
And I because of conversations that you and I have every week when we go for coffee and the parallels I noticed to this video, I was like, we're in a multi-level marketing company. I remember I told you this.
Yes.
And you said I literally just interviewed somebody who also made this connection. So, I can't take credit for it, but I
Yeah.
didn't know about it before I made the connection as well. So I just find that really interesting
Yes.
that that's what it is. It's this cycle. And I think a lot of it, I don't know, maybe I'm being naive when I say this, but I feel like a lot of it might be subconscious, like people not realizing that that's essentially the environment that they're creating.
Mm-hmm. Do you
Bec-
want to explain to the listener what it is? Like, what is multi-level marketing? Because I think some people don't really know what it is.
well, and it's kind of hard for me to even really wrap my head around, but I immediately think of companies like Mary Kay Cosmetics or Young Living Essential Oils, where
Herbalife.
Herbalife, oh my gosh, where you are paid to sell products of a company and you're kind of sold this idea that if you sell so many products, you'll move up in the company and have these different titles that are going to offer you more money. And it's essentially a pyramid scheme because the people who actually make it to this top position of making more money is so rare, it's so small. That percentage is so small. And the number of people at the essential bottom of the pyramid is huge. And you just are constantly told, well, if you're not selling enough, you're not going to go to the next level. So we're going to give you all this motivation and hold all these conventions and, make you feel really special and good, but you're never going to sell enough of these products in order to actually make a living.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, it feels like the yoga world is the same. These
Mm.
studios are mostly sustained through yoga teacher trainings, but the teachers going through these trainings are rarely going to be able to use yoga in and of itself to build a sustainable income.
Mm-hmm.
And, the parallels are there, but so are the differences because not
Yeah.
everybody doing yoga teacher training wants to teach yoga. Not everybody even doing yoga teacher training who wants to teach yoga want to do it in a way that will sustain them in a full-time
Yeah.
income kind of a way.
Yeah.
So, it's not apples to apples, but there are enough similarities that it just struck me as the ability for it to become unethical really quick is high.
Yeah, yes. And you know what stood out for me from that comparison of MS with yoga studio and maybe like teacher training setting of the yoga teacher training is that, well, maybe it's not only teacher training, it's also yoga studio as a whole, maybe, is
Mhm.
that they're not only selling the product, but they're selling, this is probably coming from, I think, Rebecca, but selling belonging. Like if you are
Mm.
part of this thing, then you belong with us. You have a community. You have like-minded people to be around. And yeah, people feel like they need to stay connected to this community.
So this idea of selling belonging, that one also really got me. That is huge because you really do cultivate community at yoga
Hmm.
studios.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest reasons I think yoga teachers have a hard time leaving or, really sticking up for themselves and being willing to leave if what they're advocating for doesn't come to fruition is because they feel this loyalty to the students in their classes. They feel this loyalty to their coworkers, to the front desk folks. And this is one I also struggle with because I'm not sure who this falls on.
Hmm.
Again, this could be me being completely naive, but I don't know if yoga studios knowingly do that. Like, is that something that's a byproduct? Teaching these classes, developing your community, your people that are really loyal to you, that I think that happens. And then it's what makes it very difficult to leave.
Hmm.
But is that a conscious thing that's known and then manipulated and sold and
Mm,
I think that's a question I have. Or maybe it's some
mhm.
combination of both.
Yeah.
Maybe studios bank on it, if that makes sense. So even though they're not necessarily knowingly selling it,
Mhm.
they know that teachers, if they don't want to necessarily like come to terms with what a teacher wants in terms of pay or benefits, they might know it'll be hard for them to leave because of how much of a following and community they have at the studio. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know. Part of me thinks they must know this, but I mean, that's kind of also how cult works, right? If you want to compare yoga studio to cult, which some yoga studio is connected to cults, but
Mhm,
I feel like they want you to feel belonged in this community, and then almost like leaving this community is like not even an option for them. Like once you leave this community, you're left with nothing. You're leaving all this amazing like friendship and support system, sense of belonging behind. So you don't want to leave. And I feel like that's how a lot of cults are like. And
mhm,
I feel like I've been part of yoga studio who was part of that. And one other part I want to say is this is a thought I had when I worked for a yoga studio in the past that I left because I didn't align with their ethics anymore. I feel like most of the time, teacher training program attracts people, typically young female, but not always, who is trying to figure out their life. Like they're trying to figure out their next step in their life. They're trying to find something that's meaningful for them, place to belong. They're trying to figure out what to do with their life. Maybe they just had a breakup or big
mhm,
life changes or challenges. And I'm not saying all, but I've seen that and I witnessed that a lot from leading teacher trainings. And that kind of vulnerable space the students are in is a great opportunity to get them to like buy in on this community or belonging that they can feel by being staying part of this studio or staying part of this community. And it's easy to like get sucked in to this sense of belonging and feeling like you don't want to leave or you don't have other options but to stay. I don't know. That's maybe I'm going a little bit too extreme because I have a personal experience working for studio like this. And I know not all studios are like this, not all teacher trainings are like that. But I feel like a lot of teacher trainers who sign up are in this like vulnerable phase of their life. And it's easy for them to kind of get sucked in.
I could agree with that. I mean, I definitely agree with that, and I can see elements of that in my training. I think, again, it's just that chicken or egg, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what comes first and how it's used. I don't own a studio. I mean, we've said this throughout all 3
Mm-hmm.
episodes, like, neither of us you own your virtual studio, but neither of us has owned a brick and mortar, and there's so many things I could say slamming teacher trainings. Not gonna But I'm always, like, straight up like, everything you just said, I was
Uh-huh.
"Oh my gosh," there's so like, between the and I can't take credit for this next thing I'm gonna say, but, like, the trauma dumping that happens, I don't know if the person who I've
Mm.
talked to about this wants me to say their name, we both know
Mhm.
them, but some trainings are so inappropriate,
Mhm.
like, they start off with this, like, "Tell your deepest, darkest secret to us" type stuff, you feel me? And I'm like, you don't know the person sitting next to you for any longer than when you walked into this room, and you're expected to kind of dive deep into your personal history, because I get it, because they want to cultivate community and a group dynamic. There's other ways to do that beyond going into your trauma within the first
Mm.
day or even week or 3 or 4 of a training. So
Mhm.
I don't know, And then I think for every experience you and I have had, there are trainings out there that do the exact opposite and
Mhm.
really approach it from this knowledge of yoga standpoint and let the community evolve on its own and the trust open up
Mm.
on its own and not asking people to do things, prior
Mhm.
to that. The other thing I think is not all teacher trainers are equipped. to
Mhm.
handle the kind of trauma that people
Yeah,
might share, you know? And
totally.
I wonder, I think there are some studios that require teacher trainers to go through a different kind of training, you know?
Mhm.
And that has elements to a cult,
Mhm.
like you can only lead a teacher training if you go do this outside self-improvement webinar or workshop. I've
Mhm.
heard of studios having that rule.
Mhm.
And that to me is problematic because who says that that outside organization is what somebody needs in order to be able to facilitate a group training?
Yeah.
There's so many. That's like a very long and complicated topic. I
Mhm.
think a question that I have or that I encourage people to think about is truly what is it that you would want to get out of a teacher training? Do you know much about the community of the training, of the people that are hosting it? Do you know who is hosting it? Who are the faculty on it? And to just really know that you don't have to stay. If something isn't working for you, don't feel like you have to stay because you're young and confused about life or wanting to figure out something deeper about yourself. There are many trainings out there, many resources out there, and you don't have to feel stuck in one. I
Mhm.
think is maybe the more important message to share. Oh no.
Yes. And I think another thing that I've given this advice to teacher before, where if you notice you've done your 200-hour teacher training at one studio and you work for that studio and you've gone through their maybe 300-hour teacher training and you also done their like other like I don't know, yoga sculpt training, like all this training through one studio. I always encourage people to spread out. You don't have to only work for one place. Like go check out working for this gym or this community center or try applying for another studio. I think it's beneficial in so many ways for yoga teachers to have exposure to teaching in different settings, different student base, working under different management. Like, I think that's a great experience. And also, like, we'll become wiser and more experienced, not only in teaching, but like how to work with different business models. So you can kind of see what else is out there. How does other places structure the pay or structure the schedule, or some studio require you to come 30 minutes before, but you would never realize that there's another studio that doesn't require any of that, like until you actually get out and start exposing yourself to different environments. So I think that's maybe advice I would give if you're listening to this and you realize like you have only worked for one place, only did trainings at one place, and you kind of are very located in one spot only. I think it's great to get out there and see what's out there.
My biggest regret. Like everything you just said. Could you have said that to me 7 years ago, Reika? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That was and I take full responsibility for that because I was just going with convenience.
Yeah.
I had done my 200-hour at a different studio, but then when I was going
Mhm.
for the 300, I was kind of going with a studio that I did one of those like more, sculpt trainings and things like that so that I could teach the
Mhm.
different variations of classes they had. And then I just was like, well, I've already done the sculpt training, so let me just like keep going into the 300. And I was just trying to go really fast and do what was convenient. And then a situation presented itself that said, you're not doing the right thing here. You're not going about it the right way. And it made it a pretty difficult and just awful situation. And
Mhm.
I ended up leaving that training. And that's why I think my message
Mhm.
was that know that you don't have to stay. And so paired with your
Yeah.
message of like, don't feel like you have to stay in one place is so important because that is why, I think I had the experience that I did. And
Mhm.
I'm so glad because I've done exactly what you just said, which is branch out. And, I work with you and I've taken so many
Mhm.
other different trainings and it's been wonderful. It's been
Mhm.
wonderful. What I will say though, getting back to the politics part of it, you notice different treatment when you stick with the
Mhm.
studio in terms
Mhm.
of classes, class
Yeah.
allotment, class assignments. So you just have to know that and
Mhm.
be willing to just work at different places, you know?
Mhm.
Because I will say that once I did stop the training at this studio, the treatment toward me vastly changed
Mhm.
vastly in terms of classes and, you
Mhm.
know, what I was offered and when I was offered, and it was palpable. the
Yes. It's
difference.
like amount of opportunity you can get versus you will not get, or like amount of great time slot for classes you could get offered versus not, or even like whether you have more power with negotiating your raise. Like all of those things kind of come in effect with this.
Yeah, and I can't slam studios for that. I
Mhm.
understand wanting to prioritize teachers who have poured a lot of resources into the studio.
Mhm.
I get that. And that same thing also plays into the MLM aspect. Like, keep giving us thousands of dollars for these trainings, and we'll prioritize you to teach a class where you make $40 per
Mhm.
class, you
Mhm.
know? So that's where that cycle, I think, really is. And that's
Mhm.
why it gets really sticky and hard to say that any one side is doing something unethical or harmful or knowingly so. It's
Yeah.
just it's business, it's capitalism, it's what people can do. So I'm not going to be mad at people at studios prioritizing teachers who have paid into the studio. I get it.
Mhm.
But being on the other side of that sucked,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know? So there's no easy answers.
Mhm.
And then there are teachers who don't do any of that, but still have a lot of classes because of how popular they are,
Yeah.
you
That's
know? So
that's a
some
good
people
point.
can get around it that way, right?
You know how we were saying like studio it seems like sometimes they're selling belongings, and
Mhm.
they really emphasize on community, like, oh, you're part of this community. And I see the slippery slope in that. But then I also want to kind of admit that I do try to sell that part when I promote my mentorship program. I do say that
Mhm.
community is one of the best thing about this program because but that is like really coming from my bottom of my heart. But I can totally see why like studio would also want to highlight that when they're trying to market or sell their studio. Because I notice I do that with my mentorship program too.
Yeah, you do that to a different end,
Mm.
you know? I think the means to the end with you doing that is quite different. You know, you're talking about going deep into yoga philosophy, learning anatomy, inviting other folks in, and helping teachers create their sense of identity as they go along this journey. You know,
Mm.
you're not selling community as an end to get people to pay quite a bit of money in a membership or you
Mhm.
know, to pay
Yeah.
quite a bit of money into trainings that the studio has in exchange for being able to teach there. You feel me?
Yeah.
I think it's a
Yeah.
different approach. But you're right, and that's why I keep trying to say, like, I'm not caping for studios or studio owners. I am not doing that. I'm also not here to just hate on it because I don't think
Mhm.
either one is very helpful. I do wanna talk about out loud the things that a lot of people are afraid to talk about out loud who work for
Mhm.
studios because I don't work for them no more, and
Mhm.
I feel like I have the liberty to do that, but I
Mhm.
wanna do it in a way that is authentic and helpful.
Mhm.
And I hope that I'm walking that line of not trying to, like, not say what's up and what I don't agree with, but also recognize that I've never been on that side of being an owner. So, how do we
Mhm.
help teachers who have also never been on that side feel really good about what they're doing and where they're teaching?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I think we have offered a lot of food for thoughts for people listening to this whole series. I feel like this whole series has been great. I think we talked about a lot of juicy topics.
I hope so. I hope so. And it's why for the longest time, I have been thinking about a metaphor that I want to
Mhm.
share and that I'm a little nervous to share because for a number of reasons I'm nervous to share it, but it hit me when I was having a conversation with a woman that I used to work at a studio with. She was talking about how when she was deciding to leave the studio and create her own thing, she was talking to the owner of the studio that we both worked for. And the owner had a comment and said, well, are the students that take your classes, are they your students or are they my students? Meaning, when you go start this new studio, are you going to try to take the students that take your classes at the studio that I own, you feel me, if you can follow that, to this new space that you're opening up? And she responded and was like, neither one of us owns these students. Like, they're neither mine nor yours. They're their own person who can make their own decision. You feel me? And it struck me that we talked a lot about like industry politics of the yoga world. And I think that can be extended to this metaphor of almost plantation politics. Students, studio owners, they own a physical space, they own property. And by extension, I think that makes them feel like they also own the bodies that enter and exit that property that they own. Hence the non-compete clauses that, even though are illegal in California, many, many, many studios have that written into a contract that teachers are made to sign, which is bizarre to me. And then when it's not a contract, it's still very much communicated, like studio owners that are maybe too nervous to actually put it into a contract. It's still very much communicated and a part of the culture. And one of the reasons why I was nervous to share this metaphor is because plantation politics lends to enslaved people, and the vast majority of yoga teachers, at least in the United States, are white. So I'm always nervous to extend a metaphor that really applies to Black folks mostly and people of color broadly to, a yoga population. But I think the idea holds, like, you feel like you own what this person can do and where they can work and where they can go. And that is so, 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 so problematic. So we've got these like three structures, I think, that govern an industry that wholeheartedly not preaches, but says against all of it, with like plantation politics, multi-level marketing politics, and then this kind of cult-like erroneous selling of community politics.
Yeah.
And I think if teachers can be aware of these overarching metaphors and where you see yourself in it, that it could be helpful. And I say see yourself in it meaningfully, purposefully, because I don't know that there's a way to exit it. But being aware of it gives you a lot of power to decide if and when and where you want to navigate it. You feel me? As opposed to just being unaware and just being like, oh, I'm teaching yoga and I love it, not knowing that there are these dynamics at play.
Yeah. When you were explaining that, a lot of examples popped into my head of that. A lot of studios or places you teach at, they usually don't want you to promote your newsletter, try to collect people's email addresses, your students' email addresses. Some places don't even want you to share your social media. Some places don't want you to share where else you work. If student asks, hey, where else do you teach? They don't want you to say anything. Some places will have rules. I think we talked about it in the previous episode, but they will have a rule that you're not allowed to lead a retreat outside of that studio setting. And another personal example of mine is when I decided to leave a studio because I did not agree with their rules and ethics of the studio, and I gave my 2 weeks notice, their decision was to tell me, you don't get that 2 weeks. You don't need to come back to the studio anymore. Because I would strongly believe, they didn't say that, but this is my opinion or my suspicions, or that what I believe is that because they don't want me to tell students, hey, this is my last week, I'm no longer teaching here anymore. Because then some people are going to ask, oh, how else can I practice with you? Or let's stay connected through social media or email address. Like, I don't think they wanted any of that, because they were afraid I was going to take some students with me. For them, the action was to like, okay, you're done now. Like, you don't get that 2 weeks. You don't get a chance to say goodbye to your students. So yeah, those are my like examples that came to me when you were explaining that.
It's just awful. I just can't imagine trying to exercise that level of control over bodies. when you are in a profession to help people connect to their bodies,
Yeah.
it is so ironic to me. And again, I will say this until I cannot anymore. I do not know what it is like to be on that other side of owning. And maybe there is a sense of lack, or there's, like I said, one podcast you had of a woman in Louisiana. She just was like, yeah, we love our studio. It's not going to make us millionaires, but we let so I don't know if it's a
Mhm.
thing of like finances or whatever it is, but it really points to the MLM aspect,
Mhm.
like that owning a studio is only going to really be a means to an end if you employ these tactics that keep your employees at a very certain level financially.
Mhm. Mhm.
And whether you do that by dictating where they can work and how much you pay them and all the things they have to do before and after class, like you're part of that structure of policies and laws that directly stem from slavery. You feel me?
Mhm.
Like an exploitation of land that Native Americans faced and labor that Black folks in the this is all a US based,
Mhm.
context. And it's where when people think of the isms, if you will, sexism, racism, when they think of them as these really just overt in your face. That's why I kind of am so frustrated with the current administration because it's made people think of these things as like what literally the president of the United States is willing to do, which is call people names and be really rude and in your face. I'm like, call me names all you want. Can I get equity in structures and in pay?
Mhm.
And I think it's the same thing of these yoga studios will, like, on the opposite end, be like, we are so nice and we are about community
Mhm.
and we love and we want you to connect to your body and we're going to pay $15 an hour in order for that to happen. And you're not going to complain about it because we're not doing this overtly in your face. We're using these
Yeah.
subtle structures and systems that our
Yeah.
country was founded on in
Uh-huh.
order to maintain our position and in order to
Mhm.
keep you in your position. You feel
Mm.
me on that? Like, it's not
Yes.
comfortable. It's so uncomfortable. And that's where it's like blaming individuals isn't where it necessarily is at. It's a
Mhm.
larger structure that people feel compelled to navigate in ways that keep them above board,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think maybe what's unique to the yoga industry or world in this is that they use the term like service to others, service to your communities,
Mhm,
karma yoga,
mhm,
seva. They use these yogic terms to kind of justify
mhm.
maybe some of their actions. And that's when I feel like there's this like disconnect between yoga practitioner who want to live their life in according to many of the beautiful teachings of yoga, the principles of yoga, yamas and niyamas. And then there's this other side, it's like, but then we're business. We need to make money, we need to make profit. This is like
Mhm.
capitalism. And then those two doesn't like you can't do I don't know, maybe you can do both, but it's hard to balance both. Because if it was like another company that was just trying to profit from the product they make, like, maybe we there's not as difficult, and, like, maybe because it's yoga, it gets a little muddy and tricky, and because we're all about service and giving back and karma yoga and seva and ahimsa. I wonder if that's what makes it also, like, hard or interesting or muddy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, the business aspect of yoga is part of most teacher trainings. And I remember mine, but I remember just like glazing over. You know what I mean? Because I just
Mhm.
was like, the person who led it was the owner of the studio, and I could see through it a mile away. And I don't want to say too much more about that, but I just felt gross during it. And I was like, I felt the complete separation of it.
Mm,
So I think others probably do it a lot better, where it is more
mm,
integrated, like you said,
mhm,
or like they talk about those two parts. But when I was in mine, it was just business. And I'll never
Mm.
forget the owner was like, there's nothing that gives me more joy than when contractors are coming in and I'm, telling them like, this is what I want and this is how you do it and da 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 da, like just on this whole power trip thing. And that's when I was like, this is a complete. And to that person's credit, like at least they're being honest. It was
Mm.
authentic.
Mhm.
I think it's worse when yoga studios do try to integrate yoga and the business of yoga, but it's really inauthentic and untrue. But for him, it was like a power trip.
Mhm.
He just loved like being in charge, and his big thing was if
Yeah.
a studio doesn't have 2 rooms, it's not going to succeed.
Mm.
Um, and I've seen that to be true across
Mm.
the city, studios that don't have at least 2 rooms.
Mm.
I don't know. But again, if I were to open a yoga studio, it would last a whole 6 months, because I would try to do sliding scale costs and I would pay teachers $500 and like and that's just not the way to go. So I can have all of the critique in the world, and I have also never done it before.
Mm.
But I think there are examples of people who have, like the woman you interviewed with the studio in Louisiana, who are doing it ethically and
Mhm.
admit that it's not making them rich.
Mm.
I've
Yeah.
also want to shout out studios that get so mad at the non-complete compete clauses. I remember I
Mm.
worked for one yoga and Pilates studio, and I was telling the owner how I'm going to have to navigate this because one of the studios I work for has an issue, and she was so mad because she was like, "That is illegal. I can't believe people are still doing that." Da 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 da
Oh,
da.
yeah.
Mind you, this same studio owner was also the one giving extremely low pay rates. Because she had to, because she had just taken on a big but, her whole thing was like, "I'm gonna increase the rates as soon as I can, as soon as I'm not in debt." So
Yeah.
so that's where I'm saying, like, it must just be this constant struggle. Like, she was so
Yeah.
angry about non-compete clauses, but was also paying teachers $20 an hour per class,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
is she
It's
wrong for that?
hard.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard. And even in my own little tiny little virtual yoga studio,
Mhm.
like I also can't afford to pay guest teachers high rate because what I'm making from the studio is probably like 25 a class or something like that. And that's not even like could be lower. That's not including all the admin work and all the back end hours and hours I put into the online yoga studio. And it's hard. It's like I want to pay teachers $80 a class.
You still pay more than $20 an hour. You
Uh,
still pay more than that, and you find other
uh,
ways to I've noticed, like,
mm,
if when I was teaching for your studio, I remember if I got people to come to the class outside of people who were already members,
mm,
then I got, like, half of what they like, you were
yeah,
so ethical about how you tried to go about it, and I have to say this
yeah,
studio owner was also ethical about saying, like, "Listen, this is what I can pay you until 2 years from now when I'm not in debt over the so,
mm,
you know, uh,
yeah,
but in her defense, she also was like, "There's no way I'm gonna tell you you can't work at a place 5 minutes down the road because I'm only paying you this amount."
mhm,
And other studios do not have that mindset.
yeah, yeah,
So, it's a tough thing, but again, I
mhm,
think and I worked for her for as long as I could.
mhm,
So again, I think the question I would put out there for yoga teachers, or the thing I would say is, can you be aware of the pay
mhm,
structures and the dynamics across multiple studios? Like you said, if you're kind of tunnel visioned into the way only one works,
mhm,
find out how others work. Maybe you're on the good end of it,
mhm, yeah, it's
and
true.
just leave it alone. Don't go nowhere
Yeah,
else.
yes,
Or maybe find out you're working somewhere where you have to do way more work for less pay per hour. And so if you've worked there for a certain amount of time, or if you have a question about that, can you go talk to whoever it is that you would talk to about that, whether it's a studio owner or someone over payroll or something like that? And if
mm,
you don't feel like you have the skills to do that, or you have questions around it, unsolicited plug,
mhm,
join Reika's mentorship group. Because that's what we learn about. One of the only reasons why I'm able to have this podcast with you right now is because I've been in the group for
mm,
5-ish, 6 years now, you
mhm,
know? and I have learned so much. And it's so cool because we learn it not from force, not from, we learn it from each
Mhm.
other, from sharing stories with each other. One of the biggest things, I think we already talked about this, but like if you do a workshop at a studio, please find a group like we have and ask what other studios do, like
Mhm.
what's the split for the
Mhm.
workshop in terms of
Yeah.
if you work with the studio and they help you with advertising, do you get 60% of the profit and they get 40, Or is it flipped? Like, just do your research. Just
Yes.
don't take an answer for an answer. Be informed.
Yeah.
Be
Yes.
informed.
And I think, yeah, that's one of the amazing thing about this mentorship program is because we have teachers from who works from different places, different part of town, different states, different all this, and we can share what our experience has been. Like, oh, this has been my experience, this kind of
Mhm.
split. Or, I feel like that is power. It's a power to us as a yoga teacher, like knowledge and sharing information. I think it, and also like the supporting each other and all of that is important. But maybe another perspective to this whole studio thing is that, like, if you can look at studio teaching job as not a way to pay your bills, like, it's going to be a small amount, and what else are you able to receive that's not monetary from working here? Like a lot of time I feel like studios give you exposure. You get to be in front of bigger group of
Mhm.
students. They get to know you. They might start following your social media. They might start joining your newsletter, and they might eventually sign up for your workshop, trainings, retreats, or maybe they'll sign up to purchase your online offerings in the future. So like I feel like using studio teachings not so much to pay your bill, but it's a way that you're building your own business or you're building your own, I don't want to say brand, but like you can teach it so that there's like a long term, maybe something you're building from
Mhm.
what you're doing now, and not expecting studios to be able to pay you $80, $100 a class, because that's rare. It happens, but it's rare for studio to pay that much per class for group classes. So, what am I building from this? Like, what's the give and receive in this contract or this relationship I have with this studio that sometimes is beyond just the pay?
100%, 100%. And something you said is making me think of something, which is to also feel like you're negotiating and you feel good about where you are for the amount of experience that you have.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think with conversations like these, a new yoga teacher could be listening and get really empowered and
Mhm.
graduate from their 200-hour teacher training and go do an audition and crush the audition and, say, I need to be making $80 per class as a result. And,
Mhm.
you know, that's not realistic, right? So, like, you want to negotiate based on where you are in your trajectory. And
Mhm.
maybe in saying that, it's not such a bad thing that when I had this exposure to two very different pay structures at a studio, I just went with it because I was brand new and I was just
Mhm.
figuring it out. And like you said,
Mhm.
I was getting to do all of those things, like build my
Mhm.
voice and build my teaching style
Mhm.
and find the people that liked it. And then
Mhm.
7 years later,
Mhm.
I'm able to do some of those negotiations and navigate a bit differently because of the amount of experience I've accumulated. So the last thing I want
Totally.
to do is have like a brand new yoga teacher listen to this and feel like they should be where we are right now.
Mhm.
Not quite,
Mhm.
but do enter a little bit more aware maybe than you and I did and
Mhm.
feel good about what you're doing and where you're doing it for how much experience you have, you know?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
don't necessarily compare yourself to somebody that's been doing it for even 2 years, right? Because it's just
Mhm.
probably going to be different.
Totally.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're right. You have to think about those things initially, and I don't think
Mhm.
about them as much now.
Mhm.
I turned down a recent offer I had to work at a luxury apartment complex because the pay rate was less than what I was making,
Mhm.
and I'm kinda like, it don't make sense to me to go teach for people that can afford to live in a high luxury
Mhm.
and you're not even gonna pay me what I make working for a public studio. You feel me? But
Mhm.
this is 7 years in, you know?
Mhm.
I think it would be perfect for somebody newer to teaching. But do you
Mhm.
see the MLM piece in that? This apartment building can afford to pay you what a corporate job would pay, like $150, you know?
Mhm.
But they don't because they want a profit margin, which I
Yeah.
get, but I'm not in that no more. I can't do that anymore. But I think for somebody just starting out, it's going to be way more than what a studio will typically pay you. And you get to build your voice and your teaching style and be in front of people. You feel me?
Mhm.
So I think it's
Yeah.
the awareness. I would hate for a brand new teacher to turn that down
Mhm.
just because the amount that they're offering should literally be double, you know?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I think that's a good place to wrap up this series. I think we shared a lot, gave a lot of
I
our
hope so.
experiences and our maybe tips or things to consider. It was really fun to have this conversation with you, Sunny. And thank you for being willing and open and vulnerable to come on this podcast to share all of these information as well as your personal experiences and like things we have learned along the way of being a teacher.
Absolutely. Thanks for being willing to have the conversation. And like you said, I just hope people feel informed. I hope their awareness has increased. And I hope you, most importantly, find a community to be able to process your thoughts and feelings and experiences because that is the most powerful. When you're out
Mhm.
navigating it all alone, I think it's much harder. If you can do it
Yes,
in trusted, yeah, doing it in trusted community is just gonna really help, I think, in a lot of
yeah,
ways.
definitely. I agree with you. And let the listeners know how they can find you and if they want to connect with you or maybe message you to give us a little feedback on these conversations we had or anything like that. Let them know how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, and especially studio owners. You know, if you have answers to any of the questions we posed, if you're a studio owner who feels like you really do approach this from a super ethical way, like, let us know. Sunnyside Yoga
Yes.
Lattes. Yeah, Sunnyside
Yes.
Yoga Lattes. The way it sounds is the way it's spelled, and that's my Instagram and YouTube and all of that.
Great. Thank you so much, Sunny, for coming on for this mini series. And I will talk to you soon. I hope you enjoyed the conversation I had with Sunny, and I really hope you enjoyed this 3-part series, Navigating the Politics of Yoga Industry, that Sunny and I recorded. It was really fun for us to talk about these topics, and we have gotten a lot of feedbacks about how this has sparked a lot of interesting questions and discussions amongst other yoga teachers, and we really love to hear that. And to be honest with you, we were somewhat a little bit nervous to record these really candid, vulnerable, and honest conversations. And we're really sharing a lot of our own experiences and some of the stuff that we have gone through. So yes, it was a little bit scary for us to record and actually publish this to the public, but we really felt like it is an important conversation to be had, and we really hope that these episodes gives you some things to think about and even empower some of you listening, as well as can spark a really important conversations with fellow yoga teachers and even studio owners. So I hope you enjoyed these conversations. I just want to say that thank you so much for listening, and every single person who have been listening to these series, as well as those of you who have sent me messages to tell me how much you have been enjoying this 3-part series. It means a lot to us, so thank you so much. I will put the link to be able to connect to Sunny or myself on social media or through our website if you ever want to reach out to us. We love to hear from our listeners. And like I said earlier, I have a workshop for yoga teachers coming up that it's going to be taught by AJ, who is a doctor of physical therapist. The workshop is called Yoga Meets Physical Therapy, The Science of Movement with AJ. It's August 8th, Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. It's in person, but will be live streamed on Zoom and will be recorded. So you can show up in person, which I would love. But if you don't live in the area, you can join us via Zoom, or you can watch the recording later. It's sliding scale pricing, so from $10 to $60, you get to choose your amount that works for your budget. And I hope to see you there in this kind of continuing education setting. You can receive 2 hours of Yoga Online's continuing education hours when you attend this workshop. So I think that is it from me today. By the time you're listening to this podcast, I will be in Nicaragua and leading my retreat there, which I am so excited for. So follow my journey along on Instagram at Reika Yoga, ReikaYoga. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.